Tell you, one of the biggest problems we have in trucking right now has nothing to do with trucking. So it's 4th of July weekend. I'm home. Gotta run out to the garage. I got a power drill, and it's dark. Just been cleaning the area up. Give me a second. Oh, let there be light. Yeah. So I've been just thinking about this for a while, and the thought struck me: how has trucking changed, and what caused it? And I think for some of you it'll surprise you, but for a lot of it won't. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is not going to be a dive into deregulation. I was at the pawn shop the other day and found me a good bargain. Found me one of these battery operated weed whackers that splits in half and you can put a pulse on the end and all that. Found that leaf blower. That's going to go into the truck. It came with a big old battery here, and that's a beast. I think that'll find its way into the truck. The leaf blowers turned out to be a whole lot handier than I ever thought it would be. No, I like battery operated stuff. It just makes things a whole lot easier. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't want to have the deregulation discussion. That horse has been beat to death. It's not one singular thing. Now, deregulation might have been part of the catalyst, but it wasn't the entire thing. The industry was changing, and you've got a greedy union on one side, greedy politicians on the other side, and a bunch of people that just want to make things better. They never do. And, you know, if you sit there and listen to Jimmy Carter's deregulation speech, you'll see, which I highly encourage you guys to do. Get online, listen to his speech, and you'll see that speech did not age well. But that being said, let's not talk about deregulation tonight. I have a headache. More or less, it'll give you a headache. So, you know, if we touch on it, it's going to be very briefly. Now, going back to where it started, if you go back and look at a lot of these trucking things from back in the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s, like that whole thing from Transport City about that female yo-yo with her. Yeah, she just passed, if you didn't know. She had MS, and she just passed, which was sad. She was big into trucking her whole life. She got a Facebook page and all that. And she was a real gung-ho truck driver. But what I'm getting at back then, if you look, you're going to notice a common theme. You're going to notice clean trucks. You're going to notice clean people. And you're going to notice that people are holding themselves to a bar. There's a standard that's being met, that people are having to meet. Now, before you all start screaming about foreigners and all that, let's slow down. We'll get to them. Because, yes, that has become a problem, but the reason it's a problem is a very real reason. Let's go back to, I think we'll just do this in the garage tonight. It's a garage night. I say that as I'm heading into the house to get something to drink. I've really gotten into Sprite Zero for some reason. Yep, that's the fridge of a bachelor. Oh, look, fruit. I really have no idea how that got in there. So, at the risk of sounding like a hypocrite, let's go back to deregulation. I told you I wouldn't spend a lot of time on it, and I'm not going to. So what happened there when things were deregulated and general freight happened? Well, suddenly the mega company was born. And the mega company started And you could trace this back to some of the first mega companies, not so much Schneider, but like J.B. Hunt and all that, in the 80s and into the 90s, to where they just started hiring anyone. Now, back in the 80s and 90s, I remember there was a lot of racial stuff concerning J.B. Hunt. I'm not going to go into that. A lot of things, you know, calling J.B. Hunt, you know, the Klan and only doing this and that and the other thing. I don't think it was that. I think that they had an idea that they were going to expand their fleet size, and they were just literally hiring anybody. But then, you know, you get companies like Schneider who create a whole nother trucking company to get away from their union side, Schneider Trucking, Schneider National. So they can start a non-union company. And CF did that with Conway. And the reason CF went out of business was not because they were broke. The union squeezed them till there was nothing left to squeeze. And you want to know how a company that owns every piece of property and all their trucks and all their trailers, just like Yellow, why are they going out of business? Well, they were just done. So CF started CCX, Conway Central Express. I think it was Central, CCX. It was their non-union company. And I actually applied to work there, and I was like, there's no way. But what these companies started realizing was you can get these brand new guys, and you don't have to pay them like a union guy. I can get 2 drivers for the price of 1. I control all their freight. And next thing you know, the mega company was born. So once the mega company was born, you had companies like Covenant, J.B. Hunt, Schneider, Swift. They just exploded overnight. And a lot of the long-standing Teamster companies, they just kind of folded up and got sold out, and because they didn't change with the times. But I'm going too far into the history of it. So you develop these mega companies, and next thing you know, you're needing drivers. So you start making allowances. The insurance companies get involved, this, that, and the other thing. Now, back in the day, you know, before CSA, before all this stuff, you could have half a dozen DUIs. But as long as they were 3 or 4 or 5 years old and you weren't getting in any trouble anymore, and they were off your record, you could do okay. Now, I'm going to tell you this. There were guys that had licenses in states with no reciprocity. You know, you could have 2 or 3 different driver's licenses. And we were on paper logs and all that. And but as for the pay and all that, you know, you either got paid or you didn't. But what that ended up doing was, deregulation did end up doing when it created the mega companies, was it destroyed the owner-operators. So enter the mega companies, and they decide that they're going to start hiring blind. If you look good on paper, you got a job. And that worked okay at first. Now I'll be the first one to apologize for the lighting in here. It sucks. So when you start hiring blind, you tend to start going through a lot of people. But what ended up happening was you lowered the bar. They started lowering the bar. They stopped requiring even just simple things. They just stopped requiring and enforcing company policies. You know, when I worked for the old man at Jim Palmer, when he owned it, there was a dress code. At blue jeans, slacks, whatever, closed-toed shoes, shirt with sleeves, no holes in anything. You were to be bathed. You were to keep his trucks clean. And I'll tell you right now, I was making 32 cents a mile. Doesn't sound like much, but I was bringing home $900 a week. And as a company driver, that was really good. I went from a company making 27 cents a mile, bringing home $400, $500, and $600 a week, and doing a lot of miles. I was running 20 hours a day. That was the Outlaw Company I talked about before. But I digress. So a lot of companies started relaxing their standards because they wanted people. I've always said that there wasn't a turnover problem. There's a retention problem. How can you say there's a driver shortage when you're hiring 2,000 to 3,000 a year for a truck fleet with 500 trucks? That's obscene. So you enter and you start getting what you get. You started lowering the bar. You stopped enforcing things like dress codes. You stopped enforcing cleanliness of the trucks. You stopped enforcing the discipline needed to do the job. You lowered the bar. In fact, in a lot of cases, you took it away. Well, enter the foreign driver. Now, I'm going to tell you this. These foreign drivers didn't get there on their own. They were allowed to bypass a lot of things. They were allowed to violate a lot of standing rules. The English language rule is a real thing that's been on the books for a long time. A lot of these rules, they just relaxed and they were told not to enforce. So you basically took the bar away. Well, they needed drivers. Well, then suddenly you got one guy that, you've got these people coming in from all over the world. Of course, they're here to make their American dream. Next thing you know, but they start cheating the system because they've never been held accountable and told to reach the bar. But then you've got American drivers that are here that aren't reaching the bar either. And the part that disturbs me is I'm seeing guys that have been in the business for 25 and 30 years who know better and are just like, screw the bar. If everybody else is doing it, I'm not going to do it either. They're getting just as bad as everybody else. So these foreign drivers, we can blame them, but they didn't get there on their own. They were they came over here and they were not held to a standard. Well, who is right now? So then, if you're not being held to a standard, you get what you get. Even if you go back and look at those videos from the 70s, even the foreign drivers are clean. They are kempt. Their trucks are clean. They are doing the job because that is what is required of them. So what ended up happening, and I started noticing this in the early 2000s, was that enter the Sweatpants Era, and it got really bad. Now, here's the thing. Where all the flip-flop stories come from, it's a real thing that was happening. It's stopped over the last few years. It's not as bad as it used to be, but you'd get these nasty SOBs washing their feet in the sink, unbathed, unwashed, with the trash trucks. Nobody told them when they got here that toilet paper was a thing. And just absolutely, since they weren't being held to a standard, they're absolutely trying to force their standard on us, which they don't have one. And telling us basically that we needed to bend to their way of life. We're like, no, we're not doing that. And it got really, really nasty. And you'd see a lot of these guys, there'd be 3, 4, or 5 in a truck. Not a joke. Now, the whole cutting a hole in the floor thing, yes, it happened. It wasn't as widespread as people think, but most of these stories that you hear are like third, fourth, and fifth hand knowledge, and the majority of these guys have never seen it. I've never seen it. But that's not to say it hasn't happened. So let's put a lot of urban myths and rumors to rest, even though it probably isn't a rumor. I watch these guys do disgusting things in parking lots. They pee and crap everywhere. They're just unclean. But they didn't get there on their own. Like I said, they were never held to a standard and never held accountable. And, you get what you get. You get feral people. Well, when you got into the sweatpants era, that became a problem. So what ended up happening is we started getting guys who were just so obese. Not a joke, they couldn't get into the sleeper. You get a Peterbilt 379, these guys are so big they can't get between the seats. They can't get into the back. Well, you can't go into the sleeper berth if you can't get in it. Then there were workman's comp cases to have, and then diabetes started happening real bad. I'm starting to see diabetes coming back. That's disturbing to me. And it's coming back because, well, even all the fast food options have gotten horrible. These truck stops, they're not interested in truck drivers anymore. There's no such thing as a real truck stop anymore. There's a few here and there, but even a lot of the old standards are, they're either turning into TAs, being part of a chain, or they've been bought out by foreigners and they run them into the dirt, which is happening a lot. There's a few truck stops that are still around. Like, I love the Regal. They do take care of the place, and I like that. It's pay to park, but he spends the money in the parking lot. So, and he hires people to clean it. But I digress. So you get a lot of these. I lost my train of thought. I remember now. We're talking about driver health. And I've told this story before, but when I was at Palmer, because you're being forced to hire blind, you don't know who, what they look like, how big they are, all that. They hired a guy that was so obese, when he stepped on the step to get in the truck, the step literally bent. He bent the step on a 379. Grabbed the wheel, and you could actually hear the bolts popping in the steering wheel. Wrenched himself up, and the wheel was cutting into his shirt. He actually had holes in his shirt where the wheel was rubbing it. And they were like, we can't have this. If this guy steps out of the truck law wrong, breaks an ankle or a leg, which is a very real thing when you're that big, he's a workman's comp case. So they had to hire lawyers and OSHA and all that to come to find out if they legally had to hire him. And I'm going to tell you right now, legally, they don't have to hire him, and they didn't. And there's nothing you can do about that. And that's why I know that driver health is a huge thing. I mean, there's a lot of things I've had to do, like change my diet. I quit smoking. Okay, it's my birthday week, so I had my birthday cigarette. Okay, I had like 7 of them. But I quit drinking. I quit a lot of the stuff I was doing just because my health is too important right now to sacrifice it over my job. And I wish guys would take their health. Well, a lot of guys are taking their health seriously, but like I was saying, I've been noticing that obesity is on the rise again because you go to these truck stops, there's nothing in there. Go into a Love's sometimes. If they got that one of them piece of crap Subways in there, it's nothing but chips, donuts, candy bars, and every sugary sweet thing you can think of. Oh, they got beef jerky and water at an incredibly inflated price. I mean, who the hell is paying $10 for a case of water? Well, I mean, the foreigners do because, well, that's their toilet paper. But it's just absolutely obscene in the truck stops. And so what are you supposed to do? And I've noticed that there's been a rise of obesity lately. So I'm bringing it all together here. Just bear with me. So what does this have to do with anything? Is that the standard's been lowered to the point to where it's just nothing matters. And guys are screaming, we need to raise the standard, and we do. But with raising the standard is a problem that has nothing to do with trucking. It has everything to do with personal accountability, personal responsibility. People have gotten bad, and they're not wanting to follow the rules. They're not wanting to do the speed limit. They're not wanting to. They're rude. They're impulsive. I'm seeing truck drivers doing more and more dangerous things all the time. One of the things, I always said that guys should drive a stick for at least the first year or two before they go into an automatic, because at least you'll have a sense of what the truck can do and you can be more in control. I've noticed that when you get these new guys that come right out of driving school in an automatic with the automatic endorsement, they tend to, with the driving aids, they tend to forget that this is an 80,000 pound vehicle. I see them just hauling ass to these truck stops like they're in their car. They're relying too much on driving aids. They're relying too much on GPS. They're relying too much on things that are there to help them, but they're allowing these things to drive the truck. Instead of being aids, they're relying too heavily on them. Like, all of these driving aids like adaptive cruise. And the adaptive cruise is idiotic because you're not paying attention. These cars got it. Suddenly if you ever watch a set of 5 cars slow down and start slingshotting back past you, slowing down, they're all on adaptive cruise. These people are on their phones. They're not paying attention. Well, the trucks are doing it too. And what happens when you start having these driving aids is that, well, the interstate's only as fast as the slowest truck. I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not against a lot of these things. I think a lot of these things are handy and useful. But people kind of lose the sense and they lose the bearings because they don't respect what the truck can do. That kid that killed all those guys years ago on I-70 going down that flatbedder. I've told this before. He didn't wake up that morning thinking he was going to do that. It's 6-7 months, no experience really. Went down the hill, and by the time he realized he was in trouble, it was too late. So you get when you have lowered the bar and you've taken personal accountability and personal responsibility away from all of these people, you're left with chaos. There is no longer a bar that needs to be met. You go into parking lots, people just park everywhere. Where am I supposed to park? Well, you're not supposed to park, in the entrance, blocking the entrance. Well, I got to stop. Well, nobody says you have to stop here. I've said this before. The truck stop's full, the truck stop's full. It's not the truck stop's job to provide you with a place to park. They don't owe you a spot. There might be a place down the road where you got to pay. I don't want to pay. Well, you know what? You may not have a choice. But I've noticed this with foreigners, a lot of these foreigners and foreign-owned companies especially. These guys just pull over on the side of the road and pull their curtains. I've seen these guys not on off-ramps, where the splits go straight or the off-ramp. They'll be sitting right there in the triangle in the middle with their curtains closed. I mean, you don't do things like that. You sit there and you park next to no parking signs, and then you're going to get indignant when you get a parking ticket. You were parked in a no parking zone. You're lucky you didn't get towed. And now, even with all this English proficiency stuff starting to happen, they're just enforcing the existing laws, but is that going to be enough? I don't know. There's something weird going on out here. I've noticed that there's an unsettling quiet right now. That it's almost like you're driving around waiting for the other shoe to fall. I don't know what's going on. The truck stops have been a little bit emptier lately. The traffic has been just slightly lighter. It's just like you're just sitting there waiting for something to happen. Now, I'm going to wrap this up here in a minute, and we're going to talk about driver pay. And one of the things that was when we lowered the bar, we lowered the pay. We did this to ourselves, so I'll explain that. I'm not going to sit here and blame the brokers for this. If you ever watched load boards back in the day, it always came out this cheap. Always. And of course, everybody did call the broker, say, no, I'll haul it for this. Well, that's not what it is. So you just laugh, hang up, and then about 4 or 5 hours, call them back and say, well, I'll still haul it for this. No. And it sits there for a day or two, and you can watch the price start creeping up. Well, now, somebody convinced a lot of these guys, especially a lot of these foreigners, that more miles equals more money, and you turn them all into bottom feeders. So suddenly, the brokers are getting their freight hauled for pennies on the dollar by a bunch of guys who should know better but do not. And they've been told as long as the wheels are moving, they're making money. And the problem is, for every bottom feeder that washes out, there's 3 more willing to take its place. So you start getting into the pay. Now, we're not going to talk about the wage gap and all that, and that could be a whole nother. That doesn't exist in trucking. Trucking is what it is. It's so many cents per mile, it's so many percent. The pay is what the pay. It doesn't matter who you are. Like I said, I was making, well, there's some loads I was making 23 cents a mile, but at 32 cents a mile, I made the most money as a company driver. I was consistently $900 a week. At 44 cents a mile, I was at $600 a week. It seemed like the industry figured out the more pay you make, the less miles you run, and your paychecks will seem like they just flatline at a particular number. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but over 15 years of being a company driver, that's what they did. You kind of hit a magic number, and they just stopped. They turned the spigot off, and it wasn't the mileage. It was like the number. Once you hit that, that's just what stopped. So a lot of these customers, especially since deregulation and the creation of general freight, have relied on bottom feeders. Amazon is a prime example. We could talk about that, but there's plenty of other videos about that. And next thing you know, we're having to find contract freight to haul, or contract freight is getting a little light. We do hit the load boards. I haul broker freight from time to time. But I still make pretty good money. But not everybody is. So you have to kind of figure out what you're doing. And I was talking to one of our guys, our owner-operators, and the way of doing things that you used to, unless you're locked into something good and you figured it out, this leaving Monday morning, being home Friday, is just almost a fantasy anymore. Yeah, you can do it, but I've discovered that's the difference from an $1,100 paycheck to a $4,000 paycheck. Sometimes the gap has been that big. He's making $1,800, maybe $2,000 a week, and then he shows me his check. He said, well, I left Wednesday, worked over the weekend, was home on that following Monday, Tuesday, and he said, I made $2,200. And I was like, you just answered your own question. And I told him flat out, I said, dude, if you want to make money, I said, you just have to stay out here. I make phenomenal money. I make such good money that I can afford to take a week off a month and do these things. But you have to be in a position and have to find a job that'll allow you to do that. Hitting something like this right out of the gate is rare. And I've said that before over and over and over again. It's rare. A lot of the guys I know that are doing it either found their own freight, found their own customers, or have bounced from a few jobs here and there, like the majority of us, and landed at a place that's actually doing what they need it to do. Um, Making money Monday through Friday. Now, I know guys are going to pop, well, I do this and that. Yeah, you're the exception, not the rule, dude. The general rule is if you want to make money, you just got to be out. And it sucks, but that's just what you do. You've got to meet the bar. And that's kind of where I'm bringing it all right back to. We need to find the acceptable standard to do business. We need to get a good face again because trucking has a black eye right now. And it's not going to get any better until we get better. And by getting better, I mean we all have to get better as a group. We have to hold each other accountable. Peer pressure is a very important thing when holding people accountable. For, you guys will sit there and say, you just drive your truck. Don't tell me how to drive my truck. Well, no, I will tell you how to drive your truck because you driving your truck like a jackass is affecting how I drive my truck. Because when the officer sees you, he starts assuming, well, it's just like, when you go to a Walmart, there's a truck in there and he's throwing trash in the parking lot. Well, you burn the locals. They start assuming that all the truck drivers are trashy. You sat there and exposed yourself, peed in the parking lot. Well, you did it in front of the city councilman's wife and her 2 kids. Hey, guess what? The city councilman goes and bans you all. Because when the trucker leaves, the city's forced to deal with what's left. Have you been to the back row of a truck stop lately? They're trashed. There's dog crap everywhere. There's human crap everywhere. The whole place smells like urine. There's just trash. People are just dumping everything out of the back of their trailers, pallets and rotting food and things of this nature. Well, yeah, we've got to get better. We've got to meet the bar. And look, I'm not going to say I haven't done things like that. I'm not going to be the hypocrite here because I'll admit I have. But I learned real quick. You start getting run out of places. You start limiting yourself. That's what I'm talking about. Let's not limit ourselves here. We've got to get better as a whole, and we've got to start reaching that bar again because I'll tell you right now, nobody's going to do it for us. I think, if you start reaching that bar and we take some of these foreigners under our wings that are here legally doing things the way they're supposed to be doing, they're going to realize that there's more money reaching the bar too. They're going to be like, it'll click. It'll start clicking for everyone. We're all out here to make money. We're not out here to fight. We're not out here to cut people off and have road rage and do all of these stupid hood rat games that everybody seems to be doing. We're out here to make money. But we have to work together and we have to reach that bar because I'll tell you right now, if we don't do something here soon, they keep wanting to pass regulation after regulation after regulation. And we're going to end up with our hands tied, behind the curve. And that's not somewhere we want to be in the industry because I'll tell you right now, I was trucking, and like I said, I've been trucking almost 25 years now. And in just a short time I've been trucking, I've seen it flipped on its head. And my buddy Lloyd, he started driving in 77. He's 70 now. I can't even imagine what he's seen. He went from regulation from chauffeur's license to CDLs to all of this. He's seen the whole gamut. And I'll tell you right now, he's one of the few guys left out here that were driving before deregulation. You just have to start changing with the times, but we've got to be better. I know I sound like a dumbass Tony Robbins thing, but we've got to get better, guys, because it's not going to get any better unless we get better. We've got to start keeping these places clean. We've got to start fighting. We got to stop fighting each other in the fuel island and start acting like professionals. That's it. We are called professional truck drivers. But lately, all anybody wants to do is act like a damn amateur. We're not amateurs out here. We need to be professional. I've talked long enough, and I'm sure this video will be longer than I intended. So hey guys, thanks for hanging out with me in the garage tonight. Let's get better, and we'll see you next video.